And welcome into the news at 10. I'm Morgan Romero. The case continues against Ross Wardlaw, the man accused of murdering 25-year-old Jordan Harpst along the Boise Greenbelt. Wardlaw appeared virtually for a preliminary hearing today where his attorney requested a mental competency evaluation. This is not the first time Wardlaw's competency has been questioned, as we've reported on previously. Court records show earlier this year, he was found incompetent to stand trial on separate charges, sent to the state hospital, and later deemed fit to move forward with his case. He was released after a jury acquitted him about 2 months before investigators say he killed Harpst. A status hearing for that murder charge is scheduled for August 25th. And in the case where he was acquitted, Wardlaw was charged with felony aggravated battery and assault. And for the past week, Aspen Shumpert has been digging into that case. And Aspen, you've talked to people who were involved in it as well.
Right, a former alleged victim in Wardlaw's and a jury member that acquitted him on those exact charges sit down with us and now are questioning whether something in the judicial system needs to change.
It was a kind of a shock.
7 weeks before Ross Wardlaw was accused of stabbing Jordan Harpst on the Boise Greenbelt.
But then the name and the picture, I'm like, wait a minute, I recognize that guy.
Douglas Crane served as a juror for a separate case involving Wardlaw. He was on trial in May for aggravated battery and assault charges.
We couldn't find him guilty.
7 Investigates obtained transcripts from that trial, in which Wardlaw, who was experiencing homelessness, told jurors he came back to his spot in the alley near Interfaith Sanctuary's previous shelter on River Street to find his belongings moved. A man who was living at Interfaith told jurors he moved Wardlaw's papers out of the wind. Prosecutors say Wardlaw confronted the man, they got in an altercation, and Wardlaw punched him and broke his nose.
Well, of course it bled.
Yeah, how bad?
It gushed.
Wardlaw left, returned to the alley with a knife, and shortly after, prosecutors say chased and threatened a woman named Hannah French.
I thought I was going to get stabbed. I was terrified.
A program coordinator at Interfaith Sanctuary.
I was walking into the alley, and on my left-hand side, there was an individual, and his face was covered in blood. As I was talking to him, out of my right peripheral vision, a man was chasing after me with a knife in his hand.
During his trial, Wardlaw didn't dispute most of the allegations.
I agreed the day that happened that I hit him, that I struck him. I'm not saying that I didn't.
But he claimed the man in the altercation grabbed his collar, so he defended himself. Wardlaw also testified he never meant to threaten French.
One person says this, another person says this. What happened?
But the jury didn't feel prosecutors proved guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
There weren't other witnesses saying anything. Does anybody feel like that the prosecution proved that it was not self-defense? Nobody thought that.
So, under Idaho law, Crane says they had to acquit Wardlaw on all charges.
And it didn't sit well because we knew the guy punched him in the nose, but the instructions the court gave us, we had to stick with that.
French hasn't been able to shake the disappointment she felt when the verdict came down.
A lot of defeat, sadness, and I was experiencing some anger just because I think I understood, how bad he needed access to his mental health help.
As soon as he was acquitted, Wardlaw was released from custody. Then, less than 2 months later, prosecutors alleged he used a knife again to kill Jordan Harpst.
It's sad because now somebody's lost their life. As soon as it happened, I felt bad for the family.
I was heartbroken. I was sick to my stomach, This, I feel like, was something that was 100% preventable.
French says prosecutors knew Wardlaw had a decades-long violent criminal history, but Crane says they didn't bring that up during the 2-day trial. Under Idaho rules, prosecutors generally can't use defendants' previous crimes to suggest they're guilty in the case they're currently trying. Before his May trial, Wardlaw was found incompetent to stand trial and sent to the state hospital for about 2 months until he showed signs of progress.
This is not common. This is tragic.
Jody Peterson-Steigers, executive director of Interfaith Sanctuary, says the violence didn't happen because Wardlaw is homeless.
It was the fact that he didn't have access to mental health support year after year after year after year. And finally, the worst case scenario happened.
Peterson-Steigers is calling on the Idaho Supreme Court to change rules around what jurors can and cannot consider. She also wants the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare to look into why Wardlaw was released from the state hospital after about 2 months, and why the courts didn't connect him with the ongoing support as soon as he was released from custody.
Why it felt so important to get him out of the mental health care back to the court that then acquitted him and moved him back to the street.
Crane is asking the same question.
What can be done about that to keep the rest of the community safe?
Wardlaw was also charged with persistent violator and deadly weapon enhancements, but Morgan, the jury would only consider those if they first found him guilty.
Okay, so because they acquitted him, that wasn't able to be brought up by prosecutors in court.
Exactly.
Okay, Aspen, really appreciate you breaking that down.